Have you ever noticed how every time something ends, it feels like everything is falling apart, as if the ground disappears beneath your feet and all the effort, all the time, and all the emotion you invested suddenly seem like they were completely wasted? But what if that feeling is actually the biggest illusion you've ever believed? And what if the end is not destruction at all, but instead the exact moment where something inside you is being activated without you even realizing it? Because here's the truth that most people never stop to realize: every ending you have ever experienced was actually a doorway leading somewhere new, and the only reason it felt like pain was because you had no idea what was waiting for you on the other side of that door, which made your mind interpret uncertainty as loss instead of possibility. Think about it for a second. Why do people fear endings so much, and why do they hold on to situations that are clearly broken, like relationships that drain their energy, jobs that suffocate their potential, and versions of themselves that no longer exist? And the answer is simple: because the human brain is wired to prefer familiar pain over unfamiliar possibility, meaning that what hurts but is known feels safer than what could transform you but is still unknown. Let that sink in deeply. Familiar pain feels safer than unknown potential. And that is exactly why, instead of stepping forward into something new, people choose to stay stuck where they are. Not because they are weak, but because they have been conditioned over time to believe that stability equals safety, even when that so-called stability is slowly destroying them from the inside out. Now here is where everything begins to shift in a powerful way, because the moment something ends, you are forced into a space of uncertainty, and uncertainty is the only place where true transformation can exist, not in comfort, not in routine, and not in predictability, but in the exact environment where there is no script and you have no idea what comes next. And that is precisely why most people never evolve into something greater, because they spend their entire lives trying to avoid that uncomfortable space of not knowing. While the people who actually rise, grow, and become unforgettable are the ones who do not run from endings, but instead learn how to use them to their advantage. They understand something that most people completely ignore, which is that every ending strips away what no longer serves you. Every ending exposes what was fake or misaligned, and every ending forces a level of clarity that you would never reach if everything had stayed the same, and that clarity is what ultimately gives you power. So let me ask you something that requires honesty. How many times have you looked back at something that ended and realized that it was actually the best thing that could have happened to you? Whether it was a breakup that shattered you but eventually led you to someone who truly saw your value, a failure that embarrassed you but forced you to develop skills you never would have built otherwise, or a rejection that crushed your confidence but pushed you into a direction that completely changed your life. It always makes sense later when you look back with perspective, but in the moment it feels like pure chaos and confusion, and that is the trap, because most people judge endings in real time. They panic, they overreact, and they assume the worst possible outcome, and by doing that they completely miss the opportunity that is hidden inside the collapse. Because endings are not punishments meant to destroy you, they are corrections that realign you with a path you were too distracted to see. And sometimes things do not end because they are bad, but because you have simply outgrown them, and your current life can no longer contain the person you are becoming. And that realization is uncomfortable, because growth itself feels like loss. It feels like confusion, and it feels like stepping into a version of yourself that you do not fully recognize yet, which is why most people resist it and try to hold on to what is familiar even when it no longer serves them. They want growth without discomfort, transformation without uncertainty, and evolution without letting go. But that is impossible, because you cannot step into a new life while holding on to the old one, and you cannot become someone new while protecting who you used to be. That older version of you has to end, and that ending is exactly where the real beginning starts. Not when everything is perfect or clear, but in the exact moment when everything feels uncertain and undefined, because uncertainty is not your enemy, but the raw material you use to rebuild and redefine your life. It is the blank space where you get to reinvent yourself and reshape your direction, but only if you choose to see it that way, because that choice alone has the power to change everything, turning what looks like loss into opportunity, and what feels like an ending into a new beginning. Because two people can experience the exact same ending and walk away with completely different lives, where one sees only loss and stays stuck, while the other sees opportunity and evolves, proving that the event itself is not what defines the outcome, but the perspective you choose to adopt. So the real question is not whether endings are painful, because of course they are, but what you decide to do with that pain, whether you allow it to break you or you use it to build something stronger within you. Because pain is not just suffering, it is information, it is feedback, and it is a signal pointing you towards something in your life that needs to change. But if you ignore it, numb it, or run from it, you lose the lesson that it is trying to teach you. And when you lose the lesson, you repeat the cycle over and over again, facing different faces and different situations, but always ending up with the same outcome, until you finally stop, pay attention, and decide to understand what is really happening. That is the moment when everything begins to shift, when you start seeing endings differently, not as failures but as signals, not as losses but as transitions, and not as the end of your story, but as the beginning of a new chapter that you have not written yet. And there is something most people never talk about, which is that there is a moment right after an ending where you are at your most powerful state, even though it feels like vulnerability and instability, because in that moment you are no longer tied to what was, and no longer limited by old patterns or expectations. You are free, and that kind of freedom is dangerous because it requires responsibility, decisions, and action, which is exactly why so many people rush to replace what they lost with distractions, new relationships, or anything that prevents them from sitting in that space. But by doing that, they sabotage their own beginning, because they never allow themselves to fully reset and instead carry the old into the new, which is why nothing truly changes in their lives. If you want a real beginning, you have to respect the ending by sitting with it, understanding it, and extracting the lesson from it, because every ending leaves clues about your patterns, your blind spots, your strengths, and your weaknesses. If you ignore those clues, you walk into your next chapter blind, but if you pay attention, you walk in prepared, stronger, sharper, and more aware, and that is the difference between people who repeat cycles and those who break them. So be honest with yourself for a moment and ask what you are holding on to right now that has already ended, what you are refusing to let go of, and what version of your life you are trying to revive even though it is clearly over. Because that resistance and attachment is the only thing standing between you and your next beginning, not a lack of opportunity, not bad luck, and not timing, but your inability to release what is already gone. And the truth most people avoid is that letting go is not passive and it is not weakness. It is a conscious decision to stop fighting reality. And the moment you stop fighting reality, you gain power because now you can work with it instead of against it. That is where everything changes. Because when you truly accept an ending, you stop asking why it happened to you and start asking what it is preparing you for. And that single shift in perspective opens doors that were invisible before. It moves your focus from the past to the future, from pain to purpose, and from confusion to direction. And direction is what determines whether you drift through life or move forward with intention. Because without direction you react and settle, but with direction you build and create. And that is what a real beginning looks like, not a perfect start, but a decision to move forward, even when you do not have all the answers. Because you will never feel completely ready. Confidence comes from action and clarity comes through movement, so waiting for the perfect moment or for certainty only keeps you stuck. Life rewards momentum, not hesitation, and endings give you that momentum by pushing you forward even when you resist it, breaking the illusion of control, and reminding you that nothing is permanent or guaranteed. And that realization is not something to fear, but something to use, because when you truly understand that everything can change, you stop playing small and start becoming intentional, focused, and driven. You stop wasting time on things that do not matter and begin to take control of your life instead of drifting through it. And that awareness is what separates those who stay stuck from those who rise. So, the next time something ends, do not panic or assume it is the end of your story, because it is actually the beginning of a version of your life that you have not met yet, one that is stronger, more aware, and more aligned. But that only happens if you step into it, if you let go of what is behind you, and if you stop looking back and start building forward with intention. Because the truth is simple, endings are not here to destroy you, but to reveal you by stripping away everything that is not real or aligned, leaving behind something stronger, clearer, and unstoppable. And that is the real beginning, not when everything is easy or certain, but when everything forces you to become more than you were before. So, do not fear the end, use it, because the moment you truly understand that every ending is an opportunity, is the moment you stop being a victim of change, and start becoming the creator of your life, and that changes everything.